Hello guys, welcome back to Car Obsession and once more to Bella, my Fiat Seicento Sporting. As you can tell by the title of this video, today I'm replacing the timing belt and the water pump. Well, actually the water pump has already been replaced. Long story short, I filmed this video 1 or 2 weeks ago, but I wasn't happy with it. The workshop was a bit noisy. I was misled a little bit by the Haynes manual, and because I didn't quite know exactly what I was doing, it was a little bit haphazard. So I'm refilming it. Now I'm more confident on how to do the job. I can show you how to do it in a more concise manner. On the topic of that, I'm not a trained mechanic. That is my disclaimer. But if you do find this video helpful or useful, then be sure to give it a thumbs up. So, yes, as I've mentioned, the timing belt and the water pump, they've already been replaced, so I'm not doing the water pump today, but I will show you how to do it from my previous attempt of filming this. Now, before you naysayers go, well, hang on a minute, you've got to take off a timing belt and refit it, that's poor practice. You would be correct, but since I've done the timing belt, I haven't really used Bella because she's been a bit lumpy. I think the timing is a bit out, so that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do it again. And now I've got more confidence in what I'm doing, I'm happier to show my experience with you. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, there's a few different ways you can do this job. To kick off with the airbox, you can either remove that, so you can remove the spark plugs, or you can just leave it as it is, which is what I'm going to do today. The reason why you'd want to remove the spark plugs is because it will make it easier to turn the engine by hand. You'll have less resistance and you'll need less effort to do so. Can you do it with the spark plugs in? Yes, it's just a bit more arduous, so I'm not going to faff about removing that. But if you did want to remove this, let me show you how to do it. So I'm going to get one of my other cameras and I'm going to try and get a point of view camera, so hopefully you can get a first person view of what I'll be doing. So back in a moment.
A few minutes later.
Okay, so hopefully this angle is good and you can see what I'm doing. So if you did want to remove the airbox, this is very simplistic. You've got a clip either side and it will expose the air filter. So that clip's got a bit snagged. There we go. There is the air filter. And then you can just simply pull it off that little breather hose there. Breather pipe, ducts, whatever you want to call it, and then you've got two 10mm nuts on the top, and then you can just move it out of the way. Then underneath here you've got your 4 spark plugs and of course your 4 ignition coils, or your ignition leads, should I say. So yeah, fairly straightforward. I'm not going to do that because it's just a bit of a faff. It's a little bit fiddly, it's not difficult, it's just, yeah, I'm just being a little bit lazy if I'm going to be honest, although it's going to require a bit more effort later down the line when I turn the engine over by hand. Now, another thing you will probably want to do whilst you're here is to slightly move the expansion tank out of your way. So you've got 2 bolts. They are a 13mm. As you can see on Bella, they're quite corroded, so getting that one off last time was a bit of fun. It did need a fair amount of penetrating oil to encourage it to undo. So I'm just going to get this camera to show you what I mean. Now whilst I'm here, you'll want to disconnect the battery as well. One thing I haven't mentioned at this point is that the 1.1 litre fire engine used in the Seicento Sporting is non-interference. This means if you cock up the timing, you won't have to worry about the pistons absolutely obliterating the valves. One could argue you probably don't need to as part of this job, but all the guides I've read to do it, so it's probably best practice to do so. Yes, we'll disconnect that in a moment. In fact, let me do it now before I forget, plus I need to pop this ratchet back. Let's move that out of the way. Right, and pop that down there. I'm trying to be a tidier worker. Whenever I work on cars, I just leave things everywhere. I'm a real messy worker and I'm trying to improve that. Okie dokie, so now that these bolts are done, you've got a little, hopefully you can see it there, it's just this, you've got a little tube that's within a grommet. And then, to be fair, you can't really position this out of your way much, but it may be enough just to help you out a little bit. So next thing we need to do whilst we're here, you've got the top timing cover, which is held on by 2 10mm bolts. You've got one just there and one at the back there. So in case my point of view camera didn't get it, I'll show you here on my other camera. So you've got a 10mm bolt there. So if I zoom out to give you a better perspective as to where it is, it's there. And the other one, which is a little bit more fiddly to get to, is just there near the dipstick. No, the red dipstick, not the one holding the camera. There we go. Right, again, pop that safe. I do have a magnetic tray somewhere, so let's actually use that. Right, where are my other bolts? Oh, that bounced. Right, stick it there for the time being. And then this one here is being a little bit more problematic because the socket isn't quite going onto it properly. There we go. Right, there we go. I thought I was going to drop it into the engine bay, but I didn't. So you've got the top timing cover. As you can see, you've got little clips there. Well, as you can hopefully see, you've got clips on here to hold this wiring in place. Just gently bring the wiring out because it's going to be old and fragile. Right. Oh, whilst I'm here actually, you may want to remove the offside headlight, or near side if your car's left-hand drive. You may want to remove that to give you ease of access. Have I needed to do it as part of the job? No. Would it make life easier? Yeah, probably, but the amount of time you've spent removing it, you're probably better off just leaving it in situ. There we go. Right, so that's what the top timing cover looks like. As you can see, it's a bit beat up. That is completely snapped, and so that's kind of broken as well. So you'll need to remove the offside front wheel, which as you can see I've done, and you also need to remove this Wheelarch trim, or a splash guard if you want to call it as such. So this one is only being held on by 2 screws. There should be one there by the looks of it, which is missing. Right, so to undo this. Oh, by the way, these are 8mm. So next up, what you're going to want to do is to take off the crankshaft pulley, and as you can see, you've just got the drive belt, the auxiliary drive belt running on it as well. Now, if you try to undo this with the ratchet, it's going to want to turn with you. So I think the Haynes manuals recommends there's an inspection plate on the gearbox and putting a screwdriver in the flywheel gear. I mean, really and truly, what I've been recommended to do by the technicians at work, and what I have been doing, and I'll show you in a few moments, is just to simply take it off with an impact gun. Nothing too torquey, because you don't want to break or round anything off, because that would be no fun for anyone. Remove that, put that out of the way. What I like to do is try and be tied in to avoid losing anything. I'll try and put the bolts with it, so when I pick this back up, I know where all the bolts are, because I'm very good at losing things. Right, there we go. Remove the auxiliary drive belt. This was replaced when I did the job last time. So this is a new belt, as you can see. Yeah, the old belt was very perished and it was all cracked. So yes, for the sake of a few quid, it's definitely worth replacing the drive belt whilst you're here, because it has to be removed. So yeah, it's no additional stress, is it? Right, so you've got the crankshaft sprocket. There is the water pump. Let me show you on this camera, just in case you can't see on my point of view camera. But there is the water pump, as you can see, nice and shiny because it's been replaced. And it doesn't look to have been leaking, so that is good news. So now the Haynes manual states that for cylinder 1, the cylinder get your words out, Aaron. Cylinder 1 piston to be top dead centre. This mark on the sprocket, as you can see there, which is kind of pointing at, I'd say 11 o'clock-ish. It needs to be in line with this top of the screw here, so about there. Now, interestingly, I saw another source that for this same engine recommended that for piston 1 to be top dead centre, this mark actually had to be more like there, which is a bit interesting. So I was speaking to Dean at Small Car Services, and he gave me a good tip which isn't in the Haynes manual, and something that's kind of led me astray. So it's going to be a bit difficult to capture on film, so I'm going to turn this camera off. I'm going to get another GoPro, so I need a bit of a tight access work. Okay, so guys, this is going to be quite difficult to capture on film, so I will do my best. So for reference, obviously this is the engine. On top of the gearbox you have an inspection plate, and it's right in the gubbings, so it's going to be really difficult to get a camera in there, even something as small as a GoPro. So I'm trying to do my best, but I'm failing. After some head scratching, I decided the best way to get a good shot would probably be to remove the ignition coil packs. I partially removed the airbox, as you can see, as well as these 10mm bolts, which actually turned out to be pointless. I removed another 10mm bolt which was required to be removed, and these two 10mm nuts. The first nut is located near the top, whereas the one on the bottom is difficult to get a good visual on, and access to it isn't particularly fun either. Now, it's actually kind of handy that I've taken this off anyway, because there's an oil leak, as you can see. This seal there, I was intending to replace that, so I can kill two birds with one stone. Now that's removed, I can just remove that seal. By the way, removing those two bolts was pointless. It's yeah, it's those ones that you needed to remove. But hey ho, it's out, which is the main thing. Although I'm struggling to remember which order the ignition leads went in. So yeah, that's going to be a little bit fun later. But hey ho. Seeing as the ignition coil pack was off, I decided to change the seal on it, as this was a job I was going to do in the future anyway, so in some respects it's saved me a bit of time, I suppose. This is the inspection area I was referring to earlier. As you can hopefully see, there is a big tooth which needs to line up with a mark on the flywheel that you'll see a little bit later. Using this method, I found the timing, as I suspected, was a little bit out. So that's the tensioner there. For that you'll need a 13mm spanner. Difficult to do it and film it because I need two hands. With the tensioner nut removed, I was able to retrieve the belt, which I assure you isn't as difficult as I somehow managed to make it look here. Right, so crankshaft sprocket is where it should be. I know it's top dead centre because I've checked the mark on the flywheel. That's all good. Come to the top. Top looking good there. We're now stepping back in time to the first attempt of me filming this video, as I'm showing you the process on how to replace the water pump. Removal is pretty simple. It's held on by 3 10mm bolts and one 10mm nut. Getting the old pump off was a bit fiddly, as it was stuck pretty well, so I carefully used a pry bar to help lever it away from the engine. Ah, there she blows. Carefully using a flathead screwdriver, I removed any old sealant that was left over before applying fresh sealant to the new pump. Note, the water pump does not have a gasket, you just use sealant. When fitting the new pump, the torque setting for the nut is 10 Nm and for the bolts it is 8 Nm. Right, back to the more futuristic Aaron, if you get what I mean. So on the belt you've got two arrows. They need to go with the rotation of the engine, so when not on the car they'll be going that way, so like that. And as you've also noticed, there's marks on there that correspond with the timing marks. So from memory, I think this mark here needs to go on to the, yeah, that one goes on to the crankshaft. Now you can get locking tools to help with the job. Do you need them? I'd argue not. Now, you're very likely to want to remove the radiator fan, which is just, it's 3 bolts. I think they're either 8, 10 or 12 mil. I'll put it in the description. Because if you remove the radiator fan, you do get quite a bit more access, and it is less of a faff. Am I going to try and refit the timing belt cover today? I'm not too sure because it's quite battered. So you've got a bolt. Where are we? So you've got a bolt there holding it on. There's one at the bottom, just there. And there's one up here, which you can't really see. Actually, no, I think you can see it. I think it's kind of toward, at the background in the middle of your screen. So, right, let's mate the new belt back on. I know that the timing marks are good. I've checked them. So this line on here corresponds with that. This can be a little bit fiddly to feed it back through, because it can get snagged on things, but it's not the end of the world. So that's how the tensioner looks. What you'll need to do is you have this to remove from the old tensioner, and that simply just slots in like so. Nice sturdy click. And now we want to put the tensioner back in place. What I'm going to do is to get the tension on the belt. There we go. I'm going to use a pry bar. With the belt in place, it was time to turn the engine over by hand for 2 rotations to even out the tension. As mentioned, this was done with the spark plugs left in, but for comparison, this is what it looks like if they have been taken out. Okay, so that's probably the best angle you're going to get. So can you see, I'm going to ring it on the camera, but you've got a little mark on the flywheel, and then if I do another ring, that's a tooth that needs to be in line with. What I've learnt is that you need very marginal movement in order to move the flywheel. I've gone past the mark quite a few times. So yeah, this is, I would argue, the best way of doing it. Okay, it's a bit of a faff, but you know that the piston one is definitely going to be at top dead centre. So that was such a minimal movement, but if I look down here, I would say that looks to be bob on. Now you can see the tooth just about, but you can't see the mark. The mark is under the tooth, that's why you can't see it. So see in relation to where that is on the camshaft, crankshaft sprocket. So I think that's where I personally have been going wrong, because I would argue that dash isn't quite in line with the top of that groove there. So if I bring you round, might be difficult to get perspective for what I mean, but I would say where that cutter is on the sprocket, it's not actually quite in line with the top. I'd say the top's there, and it's there. And when I did the last time, I was making sure this line was a bit higher up. That's probably where I've been going wrong. So yeah, I think that should fix the issues that I was having. Right, when it comes to your timing mark for the top, it's a little bit difficult to pinpoint it exactly, because you can get a bit of parallax, and that's when you're looking at something not quite from the right angle. So the timing mark is this little cutout on the camshaft sprocket. It's just there, and it needs to be in line with there's a little kink just there. It's difficult because ideally you want to view it from there, but you can't because obviously the front wing's in the way. So I think that looks to be in line, and that one's a bit more tricky. Now that I was satisfied the engine timing was right, it was time for the reassembly. This started with the bottom timing cover, which for whatever reason wouldn't line up at all the last time I tried to refit it, but this time went on first time with little issues. Go figure. It's just one bolt holding it in, which I believe is a 10mm. Let's face it, it's bound to be a 10mm, isn't it? Yeah. There we go. I'm not going to do it too tight because it's actually cracked on the bolt hole. Now, an important thing I want to point out on doing this job, and something that isn't in the Haynes manual and caused me to waste a lot of time and energy when doing this job previously, is the pulley. It needs to go on a specific way. If it doesn't, the engine will not start. So on the pulley, hopefully you can see you've got a little hole there that needs to line up with a little notch on the crankshaft sprocket, which is just there. If I take you off my camera, I can get you a little bit of a closer look. So autofocus, come on, work with me, not against me. So there, that little notch there, the two need to marry up, otherwise you will have a big headache and the car won't start. Why? So it needs to go on like that, obviously with the drive belt on it. Yes, I tried to start the car a few times and I couldn't work out why it wouldn't. I sent a video to one of the very experienced technicians I work with, and almost immediately, with little information I gave him, he said, "You put the crankshaft pulley on wrong." I was like, how do you know that? But of course, that is the joys of experience. So let's marry the drive belt back up and make sure it's in the groove. With that important life lesson delivered, it was time to refit the pulley along with the drive belt. I also altered the tension on the drive belt as it was a little bit slack from the last time I did the job. With the ignition coil packs and leads reinstalled and the airbox reassembled, it was time to bear the fruits of my labour. Oh, for f***'s sake, not again. Seeing as the timing was now right, the crankshaft pulley was on the right way, it led me to believe that the issue was probably the ignition leads, as the removal of them was an obvious change point. After much faffing about and having to re-find the correct firing order, I found the leads were the wrong way around. To make matters worse, the information I had been trying to find in the first place was literally right under my nose. The order is actually cast onto the housing in which the ignition coil packs live in. The more you know. With this schoolboy error cleared up, Bella was ready to roar into life. After that was rectified, it was a case of reassembling everything and finishing the video. So as you can see, the issue in the end was very simplistic. The ignition leads were in the wrong order. Yeah, I know, rookie mistake, but in my defense, I followed the order as suggested by someone on a forum, and it turns out their information was incorrect. I subsequently found the correct information on the same forum in a different thread, and as you can see, Bella is now starting and running. Speaking of which, the engine does seem to be running a little bit more smoothly than before, which would lead me to believe my suspicions were correct. I was pretty sure the timing was a little bit out from the last time I did this job, so I'm glad I redid it and I'm glad I refilmed it. If you're a hobbyist mechanic or if you're relatively handy with a spanner, is this a job you can do yourself? Yes, it is, providing you've got the right information, you take your time and you follow the instructions. The good thing about this engine, it's non-interference, meaning if you cock it up, you don't have to worry about the pistons smashing into the valves and giving you a large headache and an equally large repair bill. So if you do make a mistake like I believe I did on my first attempt of doing this, then it doesn't matter. It just won't run quite as nicely. If you have found this video useful, helpful, or maybe even enjoyable, maybe you get your kicks watching a man in his early to mid 30s working on an old rusty Fiat. If you do, be sure to subscribe. There's going to be a bit more of that coming your way. Yes, if you have found it useful, be sure to like, comment and subscribe. If you are subscribed, don't forget to click the bell icon so you get notified every time I make a video. But until the next time, guys, be sure to keep up the car obsession. No, it's okay, Leo. Bella isn't replacing you. She's just a little fling. You know I love you. Come on, bring it here. Right. Cup of tea, I think.